My name is Sienna Miles. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered my husband Tom wasn't just bringing home souvenirs from his business trips anymore. He was bringing home receipts for jewelry I'd never seen, paid for with money from my writing account.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh.
The morning light filtered through the kitchen window of our Victorian home in Salem, Oregon, as I stood at the stove preparing Tom's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup. For 20 years, this had been our routine. I'd wake at 6, start the coffee, and have his meal ready by 7:15, just before he'd rush off to catch another flight. Tom Miles, my husband of 25 years, was a pharmaceutical sales representative who specialized in the Pacific Northwest Territory. At least, that's what I'd believed for 2 decades. His job required extensive travel. Seattle one week, Portland the next, sometimes as far as Vancouver or San Francisco. The frequent trips had become so normal that I'd built my entire life around his schedule. I was Sienna Miles, successful romance novelist and grandmother of 3. My writing career had blossomed in my 40s after our daughter Rebecca had grown up and moved to Denver with her own family. While Tom traveled, I'd found solace in creating love stories, pouring my heart into tales of passion and commitment that resonated with thousands of readers worldwide. My novels had provided us with a comfortable supplemental income, enough that we'd renovated our kitchen 3 years ago and taken that anniversary cruise to Alaska. "Smells incredible, sweetheart," Tom said, rushing into the kitchen while adjusting his tie. At 59, he was still handsome in that distinguished, silver-haired way that made other women at the country club give him second glances. I'd always felt proud to be on his arm at social functions, the successful businessman with his accomplished wife. "You're cutting it close again," I said, sliding the pancakes onto his plate. "When's your flight?" 9:30 to Sacramento. Big presentation with the hospital group there. He kissed my cheek absently while scrolling through his phone. "I'll probably be there through Friday. Maybe stretch it to the weekend if things go well." I nodded, mentally adjusting my own schedule. Weekends alone had become more frequent lately, but I'd filled them with my writing, gardening, and video calls with Rebecca and the grandchildren. "Will you call tonight?" Of course, but he was already halfway out the door, travel bag in hand. "Love you, Sienna." The house fell silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of his car pulling out of the driveway. I sat at the kitchen island with my own cup of coffee, looking around at the space that had become my domain. The custom backsplash we'd chosen together, the farmhouse sink I'd insisted on, the professional-grade range where I'd prepared thousands of meals for our family. 20 years of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. 20 years of welcome-home meals after his trips. 20 years of holiday feasts and birthday celebrations, anniversary dinners, and casual Sunday brunches. I documented many of these meals in my novels, weaving the intimacy of shared food into love stories that my readers cherished. My latest manuscript, Second Chances at 60, was due to my editor next week. The story followed Elidor, a widow who discovers love again with her late husband's best friend. As I opened my laptop to review the final chapters, I couldn't help but smile at how different my life was from my protagonists. I had stability, a marriage that had weathered the storms of raising children and building careers, a partner who still kissed me goodbye every morning. The phone rang around 10, interrupting my writing flow. It was my bank, First National, with what they called a courtesy call about unusual activity on our joint savings account. "Mrs. Miles, we noticed several large withdrawals over the past 3 months," the representative, a pleasant woman named Sarah, explained. "Nothing that triggered fraud alerts, but since they're outside your normal spending patterns, we wanted to confirm they were authorized." I frowned, switching to speakerphone as I pulled up our online banking. "What kind of withdrawals?" 3 separate transactions, $800 on March 15th, $1,200 on April 2nd, and $1,500 last week. All cash withdrawals from ATMs in Sacramento. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Sacramento, where Tom had said he was heading today, where he'd been going frequently over the past few months for those big presentations. "Mrs. Miles, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here. Those withdrawals, my husband must have needed cash for business expenses. He travels a lot." Of course, we just wanted to make sure. Thank you for confirming. After hanging up, I stared at the bank statement on my screen. $3,500 in cash withdrawals from Sacramento ATMs, all on dates when Tom had been traveling for work. The amounts were significant, more than he'd ever needed for meals and incidentals. And why hadn't he mentioned them? I scrolled through our credit card statements looking for corresponding business expenses. Hotel charges, rental cars, restaurant meals. All the usual travel costs were there, paid for with his corporate card as always. So what was the cash for? A memory surfaced. Last month, I'd noticed Tom seemed different when he returned from Sacramento. More energetic, almost cheerful in a way I hadn't seen in years. He'd brought me flowers, not for any special occasion, just because he'd seen them. At the time, I'd been touched by the gesture. Now, a cold feeling settled in my stomach. I closed my laptop and walked to our bedroom, drawn by an impulse I couldn't quite name. Tom's dresser drawers were meticulously organized, a habit from his years in the military before we'd met. I'd never felt the need to search through his belongings in 25 years of marriage. We trusted each other implicitly. But trust, I was beginning to realize, might have been my mistake. In the back of his sock drawer, my fingers found something unexpected. A small jewelry box from Cartwright's, an upscale boutique in downtown Sacramento. Inside was a receipt for a white gold bracelet with sapphire accents. The price made me gasp. $1,200. The date matched one of the cash withdrawals exactly. The bracelet wasn't for me. I'd never seen it, never received it. Tom had never been one for expensive jewelry gifts anyway. His idea of romance was usually dinner at our favorite restaurant or a weekend getaway to the coast. So who was wearing a $1,200 bracelet that my husband had purchased with cash withdrawn from our joint account? I sat on the edge of our bed, holding the receipt with trembling hands, and realized that the love stories I'd been writing for years had blinded me to the possibility that my own love story might be a fiction. I spent the next 3 days in a strange state of suspended animation, going through the motions of my daily routine while my mind churned with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Every time I sat down to write, the words felt hollow. How could I craft believable love stories when I was questioning the foundation of my own marriage? Tom called each evening from Sacramento, his voice warm and familiar as he recounted his meetings with the hospital administrators. He sounded genuinely tired, describing conference rooms and PowerPoint presentations with the kind of mundane detail that should have been reassuring. But now I found myself listening differently, analyzing his tone for false notes, wondering what he wasn't telling me. "The negotiation is more complex than we anticipated," he explained Wednesday night. "I might need to extend through the weekend again. Hope you don't mind, sweetheart." "Of course not," I heard myself saying. "You know I understand." But I didn't understand, not anymore. Friday afternoon, I was in my writing office when my phone buzzed with a text from our daughter Rebecca. "Mom, saw the weirdest thing on Instagram today. Isn't Dad in Sacramento for work?" My heart rate spiked as I typed back, "Yes, why?" Rebecca's college roommate posted a photo from some fancy restaurant in Portland. Swear I saw Dad in the background with a woman. Probably just someone who looks like him, but it was weird. Portland, not Sacramento. I set down my phone with shaking hands. Rebecca's college roommate, Ashley, lived in Portland and frequently posted about her social life. I'd never followed her on social media, but I knew Rebecca sometimes showed me her photos during our video calls. 20 minutes later, I was creating my first Instagram account under the name Grandma Reads. It felt ridiculous, this digital stalking, but I had to know. I found Ashley's profile easily, a 28-year-old marketing coordinator with an enviable social calendar and a habit of photographing her meals. There it was, posted yesterday evening, a snapshot of an elegant dinner plate at Le Bernard, one of Portland's most expensive restaurants. And there, slightly blurred in the background but unmistakably recognizable, was my husband. He was seated across from a woman with long auburn hair, leaning forward in intimate conversation, his hand reaching across a table to touch hers. The woman was young, probably half my age, with the kind of effortless beauty that comes from good genes and professional maintenance. She was wearing what appeared to be a white gold bracelet that caught the restaurant's ambient lighting.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I screenshotted the image with trembling fingers, then scrolled through more of Ashley's recent posts. There, another photo from 3 weeks ago at Powell's Books, Portland's famous independent bookstore. Tom again, this time clearly visible, standing behind the same woman as she browsed the romance section. His arms were wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder in a gesture of casual intimacy that made me physically nauseous. My husband of 25 years, who claimed to be in Sacramento on business, was actually 3 hours north in Portland, having romantic dinners and intimate bookstore moments with a woman young enough to be our daughter. I closed my laptop and walked to the kitchen, needing something to do with my hands. Mechanically, I began preparing dinner, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, one of Tom's favorites. The irony wasn't lost on me that even in my devastation, I was still planning to feed him when he returned. The salmon was in the oven when my phone rang. Tom's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. Instead, I forced my voice to remain steady. "Hi, honey, how did the presentation go?" "Better than expected. We might actually close this deal." His voice carried that same energetic undertone I'd noticed in recent months. "I'm grabbing dinner with the team tonight to celebrate, then flying home tomorrow morning as planned." Dinner with the team? In Sacramento? While Instagram evidence showed him in Portland last night. "That's wonderful, Tom. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, sweetheart. Can't wait to be home. Miss your cooking already." After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. At 67, I still felt vibrant and attractive. My silver hair was stylishly cut, my figure maintained through daily walks and yoga. My writing career had given me confidence and independence. I'd thought I was living a fulfilling life with a devoted partner. Instead, I was apparently the naive older wife being systematically deceived while my husband built a relationship with someone who could be my granddaughter. I pulled the salmon from the oven and set it aside, no longer hungry. Then I walked to my office and did something I'd never imagined I'd need to do. I researched divorce attorneys in Oregon. The first website I clicked belonged to Jonas Everett, a family law specialist with 23 years of experience. His bio mentioned expertise in complex marital asset division and high net worth divorces. The phrase that caught my attention was protecting clients' financial interests when trust has been violated. I wasn't ready to call anyone yet, but I bookmarked the page. That night, I lay awake in our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. 20 years of marriage reduced to lies and deception. 20 years of cooking his favorite meals, managing our household, supporting his career, while he used money from my book royalties to buy jewelry for another woman. The most devastating part wasn't even the affair itself. It was the elaborate nature of the deception. The fake business trips, the carefully constructed alibis, the casual way he continued to accept my care and attention while betraying everything we'd built together. When Tom's key turned in the front door Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee, dressed and composed. He appeared in the doorway with his travel bag and the same warm smile he'd worn for 25 years. "There's my beautiful wife," he said, moving to embrace me. I let him hold me, smelling his familiar cologne mixed with something else, a floral perfume that definitely wasn't mine. When he kissed me, I tasted lies. "Welcome home," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "How was Sacramento?" "Productive, very productive." I poured his coffee and watched him settle into his usual chair at the breakfast table, completely unaware that his carefully constructed double life had just crumbled in my hands. I spent the weekend in a strange state of hyper-awareness, observing Tom like a scientist studying a previously unknown species. Every gesture, every casual comment, every absent-minded touch felt loaded with potential deception. He seemed genuinely relaxed and affectionate, asking about my writing progress and suggesting we take a walk through our neighborhood gardens, something we hadn't done together in months. "You seem different," I commented as we strolled past the Henderson's rose bushes. "More energetic lately." Tom smiled, his arm linked through mine. "The Sacramento account has been challenging, but I think we're finally making real progress. There's nothing like success to boost your spirits." Success? Was that what he called his affair? That evening, while Tom watched a basketball game in the living room, I retreated to my office under the pretense of working on my manuscript deadline. Instead, I created a detailed timeline of his recent trips, cross-referencing his claimed destinations with the bank withdrawals and what I could piece together from social media. The pattern was damning. Every Sacramento trip in the past 4 months had actually been Portland. The cash withdrawals coincided perfectly with expensive restaurant charges on his credit card, charges I now realized were probably for 2 people, though he'd been reporting them as client entertainment. I opened a new document and began typing. Things I know for certain. Tom has been lying about his location for at least 4 months. He's withdrawn $3,500 in cash from our joint account. He's purchased expensive jewelry, $1,200, that I've never received. He's in a romantic relationship with a younger woman in Portland. He's using our money to fund this relationship. Things I need to find out. Who is she? Name, background, how they met? How long has this been going on? Are there other financial deceptions I haven't discovered? What are his intentions? Affair or planning to leave? How much of our assets has he diverted? My hands trembled slightly as I typed, but my mind felt clearer than it had in days. 20 years as a romance novelist had taught me the importance of character motivation and plot development. I needed to understand the full story before deciding how to respond. Monday morning, after Tom left for what he claimed was a one-day trip to Eugene, I drove to our bank. Sarah, the representative who'd called about the withdrawals, was sympathetic when I explained I needed detailed records of our account activity. "I'm helping my husband organize our taxes," I lied smoothly. "He's been traveling so much, we need to track his business expenses more carefully." The printouts she provided painted a devastating picture. The cash withdrawals had actually started 8 months ago, not 4. The amounts were smaller initially, $200 here, $300 there, but had gradually increased. The total was over $6,000, all from ATMs in Portland. More disturbing were the transfers I'd missed. 3 separate movements of money from my writing account to our joint checking, each immediately followed by large cash withdrawals. Tom had access to my royalty payments through our joint financial management, something I'd never questioned because I trusted him completely. He'd been stealing from me to fund his affair. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot, gripping the steering wheel and fighting waves of nausea. The financial betrayal felt almost worse than the emotional one. My books, my words, my creative soul, he'd turned them into currency for his deception. That afternoon, I called my longtime friend Henrietta Lovett, a retired librarian who'd helped me research several of my historical novels. If anyone could help me investigate someone discreetly, it was Henrietta. "Sienna, you sound terrible," she said immediately. "What's wrong?"
I found myself telling her everything. The mysterious trips, the jewelry receipt, the Instagram photos, the stolen money. Henrietta listened without judgment, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy and outrage. "That bastard," she said finally. 25 years, and he pulls this? What do you need from me?" "I need to know who she is. I have photos, but I need a name, background, anything you can find." "Send me everything you have. I'll start digging." Within 6 hours, Henrietta called back with information that made my stomach drop. Her name is Margaret Aubrey. She's 29, works as a pharmaceutical sales coordinator from MedTech Solutions in Portland. That's probably how they met. She coordinates with traveling sales reps like Tom. A pharmaceutical sales coordinator. Of course, she was in his professional orbit, young and available, probably impressed by his experience and success. "There's more," Henrietta continued. "She's been posting about a mystery man on her social media for months.
No photos of his face, but plenty of expensive gifts, romantic dinners, weekend getaways. She's either very discreet or he's been very careful about not being identified. Weekend getaways? Last month, she posted from the coast, Cannon Beach. Didn't Tom tell you he had that conference in Salem that weekend? He had. I'd even packed him an extra sweater because coastal weather could be unpredictable. Instead, he'd been walking hand in hand with Margaret Aubrey along the same beaches where he'd proposed to me 30 years ago. Henrietta, I need you to keep monitoring her social media. I need to know their patterns, when they're together, what he's promising her. Of course, but Sienna, what are you planning to do with this information? I stared out my office window at the garden where Tom and I had planted our first roses as newlyweds. I'm going to document everything. And then I'm going to decide whether 25 years of marriage is worth salvaging or if it's time to protect myself. That evening, Tom returned from his Eugene trip with flowers, a mixed bouquet from the grocery store, not the carefully chosen arrangements he used to bring me. He seemed distracted during dinner, checking his phone frequently and smiling at messages I couldn't see. Busy day? I asked, refilling his wine glass. You know how it is, lots of follow-up calls after a presentation. He set his phone face down on the table. How's the writing going? Still on track for your deadline? Getting there. I watched him carefully. The story is taking some unexpected turns. Sometimes characters surprise you with their hidden motivations. Tom nodded absently, already reaching for his phone again. That's nice, sweetheart. As I cleared the dinner dishes, I realized he hadn't actually listened to a word I'd said. The man I'd cooked for, cleaned for, and built a life with for 25 years was emotionally absent even when physically present. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt something besides hurt and confusion. I felt angry. The next 2 weeks revealed just how bold Tom had become in his deception. It was as if discovering his lies had given me supernatural powers of observation. Suddenly, I noticed everything. The way he hummed while shaving before business trips. How he'd started using cologne again after years of claiming it was unnecessary. The careful way he positioned his phone screen away from me during dinner. Most telling was his sudden interest in professional development. Tom announced he'd be attending a pharmaceutical conference in Portland the following weekend, a conference that, according to my quick online research, had ended the previous month. It's a specialized session on new cardiac medications, he explained, not meeting my eyes as he packed his overnight bag. Boring stuff, but the company wants me to stay current. I nodded sympathetically while mentally adding another lie to my growing list. Will you have time for any sightseeing? Portland has such nice restaurants. Probably too busy for that. You know how these conferences are, meetings from dawn to dusk. Friday evening, exactly 30 minutes after Tom's departure, Henrietta called with an update that made my blood boil. Margaret posted an Instagram story an hour ago. She reported, she's getting ready for a romantic weekend getaway with her amazing mystery man. Posted a photo of lingerie laid out on her bed with the caption, "He deserves something special." I gripped the phone tighter. Anything else? She's been posting about planning something big. Last week, she shared a quote about taking relationships to the next level and being brave enough to ask for what you want. What do you think that means? Honestly, I think she's planning to give him an ultimatum, push him to leave you. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I prepared thousands of meals for Tom, and felt the last vestiges of my denial crumble. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a temporary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated relationship with a clear trajectory funded by my own money. I opened my laptop and began researching Margaret Aubrey more thoroughly. Her LinkedIn profile revealed she'd been with MedTech Solutions for 3 years, starting as an administrative assistant and working her way up to sales coordinator. Her Instagram showed a lifestyle that seemed beyond her salary range. Expensive restaurants, designer handbags, professional photography sessions. The photos told a story of gradual escalation. 8 months ago, her posts were typical for a young professional. Casual dinners with friends, hiking trips, book club meetings. Then came the mysterious gifts. A designer handbag in February, diamond earrings in March, the sapphire bracelet in April, weekend getaways to increasingly expensive destinations. Tom wasn't just having an affair, he was grooming her for a life he couldn't afford without my money.
Saturday afternoon, while Tom was supposedly sitting through cardiac medication seminars, I received an unexpected call from our daughter Rebecca. "Mom, I'm worried about you," she said without preamble. "You sounded strange during our last video call. Is everything okay?" I considered lying, protecting her from the ugliness of her parents' marriage. But Rebecca was 32, a mother herself, old enough to handle adult realities. "Your father is having an affair," I said simply. Silence. "Then, are you sure?" I gave her the condensed version, the fake trips, the stolen money, the Instagram evidence. Rebecca listened with increasing fury. "That bastard," she finally exploded. "Mom, I am so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. I'm still gathering information." "Good. Don't make any rash decisions. But Mom, promise me you won't let him gaslight you into thinking this is somehow your fault. You've been an amazing wife. This is entirely on him." After our call, I felt simultaneously supported and more alone than ever. Rebecca lived in Denver with her own family. My sister Sally lived in Florida. My closest friends here were either casual acquaintances or couples friends who might feel obligated to remain neutral. I was essentially facing this crisis alone. Sunday evening, Tom returned from his fictional conference with the kind of satisfied exhaustion that comes from a fulfilling weekend. He kissed my cheek absently and headed straight for the shower, washing off evidence. I now realized. "How was the conference?" I asked, when he emerged, hair damp and smelling like hotel soap. "Informative. Lots of new developments in the field." He was already reaching for his phone. "I might need to do more training in Portland over the next few months. Stay current with the trends." More training, more lies. More money diverted from our accounts to fund his double life. "That's wonderful that the company is investing in your education," I said evenly. Tom looked up from his phone, perhaps catching something in my tone. "You okay, sweetheart? You seem distant lately." The question hung in the air between us. For a moment, I considered confronting him directly, demanding the truth, forcing an immediate crisis. Instead, I smiled, just focused on my deadline. "You know how I get when a story reaches its climax. Right. Your book." He was already looking back at his phone, typing rapidly. "Well, don't work too hard." As he headed to bed, I caught a glimpse of his screen. He was texting someone named Ma. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you again. Next weekend. Margaret Aubrey." He wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I stayed up until midnight, ostensibly editing my manuscript, but actually creating a detailed file of evidence. Screenshots, bank records, timeline documents, a list of his lies cross-referenced with factual contradictions. If this marriage was ending, and I was increasingly certain it was, I intended to be prepared. My phone buzzed with a text from Henrietta. "Margaret just posted a photo of herself wearing what looks like an engagement ring on her right hand. Caption says soon to be on the proper finger. I think she's expecting a proposal." I stared at the message until the words blurred. An engagement ring, purchased with money from my book royalties, while I sat at home cooking his favorite meals and managing his household. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I smiled. Not from happiness, but from a cold, clear certainty that had been building for days. Tom wanted to play games with my life and my money. He was about to learn that I'd spent 20 years writing about strategic heroines who always got their revenge. And unlike his pharmaceutical conferences, this story was going to be completely real. Monday morning, while Tom was supposedly meeting with clients in Salem, I drove to the downtown offices of Jonas Everett, attorney at law. I'd made the appointment under my maiden name, Sienna Clark, claiming I needed confidential consultation regarding potential marital dissolution. Jonas Everett was exactly what I'd hoped for, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm competence that comes from handling messy divorces for 2 decades. His office was lined with law books and family photos, projecting both authority and humanity. "Mrs. Clark," he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "What brings you here today?" I handed him the file I'd prepared. Bank records, screenshots, timeline documentation, the jewelry receipt. "My husband has been having an affair for at least 8 months. He's been using money from my writing income to fund the relationship while lying about his whereabouts." Jonas reviewed the documents methodically, occasionally making notes. "This is very thorough documentation. Most clients don't come this prepared. I'm a novelist. Research is part of my profession." "Indeed. And this is all your money he's been accessing?" "Technically, it's marital property since we've been married 25 years, but the funds come from my book royalties, transferred to our joint account for household management. He's been moving money from my writing account to checking, then withdrawing cash for his affair." "How much total?" "Over 6,000 that I can document. Possibly more going back further." Jonas leaned back in his chair. "Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, which means infidelity doesn't directly impact asset division. However, the financial misconduct, what we call dissipation of marital assets, is absolutely relevant. We can seek reimbursement for money spent on the affair." "What about spousal support?" "Given the length of your marriage and your respective ages, you'd likely be entitled to support. However, your writing income complicates things. How much do you earn annually from your books?"
I'd anticipated this question. It varies. Last year was about 45,000. This year might be higher. My latest novel is performing well. "And your husband's income?" "Approximately 75,000, plus benefits." Jonas made more notes. "The court would consider both incomes when determining support. You're not financially helpless, which is good for your independence, but might reduce support awards." "I don't want to be dependent on him financially. I want a clean break with fair asset division." "Understandable. What about the house?" "We own it jointly. It's worth about 400,000, with maybe 60,000 left on the mortgage." "Any other significant assets?" "His 401k, about 200,000. My smaller retirement account, maybe 30,000. Some investments, savings accounts. He has a life insurance policy through work." Jonas calculated silently. "You're looking at roughly 300,000 in net marital assets, excluding ongoing support considerations. In a no-fault state, you'd typically expect 50%, but the financial misconduct could affect that calculation." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Tom had no idea I understood our financial picture so clearly. "What's your timeline, Mrs. Clark? Are you planning to file immediately?" "I want to be prepared to file, but I'm not ready yet. I need to understand his intentions first." "What do you mean?" I showed him Margaret's engagement ring photo on my phone. "I believe he's planning to propose to his mistress. I want to know if he's planning to ask me for a divorce, or if he intends to continue this double life indefinitely." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "That's strategic thinking. But be careful not to wait too long. If he starts moving assets or becomes suspicious of your knowledge, it could complicate proceedings." "How long do these cases typically take?" "Uncontested divorces can be finalized in 6 months. Contested cases with significant assets might take a year or more." "And if he fights the dissipation claims?" "Could be longer. Expensive, too. My retainer is 5,000, and complex cases can cost 15 to 20,000 in legal fees." I absorbed this information. My book royalties could cover the legal costs, but it would be painful. "What would you recommend as next steps?" "Gather complete financial records, every account, every asset. Open your own checking account if you don't have one. Consider consulting a forensic accountant if you suspect there are hidden assets. And, Mrs. Clark, document everything. Every lie, every suspicious behavior, every dollar you can trace." I've been doing that already. Excellent. When you're ready to move forward, call me. I'll prepare the preliminary paperwork so we can file quickly when the time comes. Driving home, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and empowerment. 25 years of marriage reduced to asset division calculations and legal strategy. But for the first time since discovering Tom's betrayal, I felt in control of my situation. That evening, I opened my own checking account at a different bank, transferring enough money to cover several months of expenses and legal fees. I also changed the direct deposit for my book royalties, ensuring future income would be protected. Tom returned from his imaginary Salem meetings in an unusually good mood, humming as he sorted through mail and checked his phone messages. "Good day?" I asked, setting his dinner plate in front of him. "Very promising. I think we're going to land some major new accounts." I nodded supportively while thinking about Margaret Aubrey's engagement ring expectations. Tom had no idea that his carefully constructed lies were about to collide with my carefully constructed legal strategy. The hunter had become the hunted, and he didn't even know the game had begun. 3 weeks after my meeting with Jonas Everett, I decided it was time to force the conversation I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Tom had just announced another conference in Portland for the following weekend, his 4th in 6 weeks, and I could no longer pretend to believe his lies. But I wasn't going to ambush him with accusations. Instead, I was going to serve him something he'd never expect, the truth, presented as elegantly as one of my carefully crafted dinner parties. "Tom," I said Friday evening as he packed for his fictional conference, "I'd like to cook a special dinner for us Sunday night when you get back, something we can talk over." He looked up from folding shirts, seeming genuinely pleased. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. What's the occasion?" "No special occasion. I've just been thinking about our marriage lately, about where we are and where we're going. I thought it would be nice to have an honest conversation about our future." Something flickered in his expression. Guilt, perhaps, or wariness? "Of course. You know I always enjoy your cooking and your company." "Perfect. 7 o'clock Sunday. I'll make your favorite beef tenderloin with those roasted potatoes you love." What I didn't tell him was that I'd spent the week preparing for this dinner in ways that had nothing to do with food. Jonas Everett had drafted preliminary divorce papers, ready to file at a moment's notice. Henrietta had provided me with printouts of Margaret's recent social media posts, including several photos from their romantic weekend getaways. And I'd prepared a presentation that would make his pharmaceutical sales training look amateur. Sunday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made our dining room feel especially cozy. I'd set the table with our wedding china and the silver candlesticks we'd received as an anniversary gift. The beef tenderloin was perfectly cooked, the wine carefully chosen. To any observer, it would have looked like a loving wife preparing a romantic evening for her husband. Tom arrived at 6:30, looking relaxed and satisfied from his weekend away. He kissed my cheek and complimented the smell of dinner, just as he had hundreds of times before. "This looks incredible," he said, settling into his usual chair. "You've outdone yourself." I served the first course, a simple salad with pears and walnuts, and poured the wine. "How was your conference?" "Educational, lots of new developments in cardiac care protocols." He took a sip of wine and smiled. "You know how these industry events are, intensive but worthwhile." I nodded and placed a manila folder beside his plate. "Speaking of educational, I have something to share with you as well." Tom glanced at the folder but didn't open it. "What's this?" "Information I've gathered about pharmaceutical industry conferences. Fascinating stuff, really." I took a bite of salad, watching his face carefully. "For instance, did you know that the Pacific Northwest Pharmaceutical Association only holds 2 conferences per year, spring and fall? The spring conference was in March, and the fall conference isn't until November." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean the conference you attended this weekend doesn't exist, Tom, just like the one you attended 3 weeks ago and the one before that." The color drained from his face, but he attempted to maintain his composure. "I think there might be some confusion, Sienna. These aren't always major association events. Sometimes they're smaller, specialized." "Tom." I opened the folder and removed the first photograph. A clear shot of him and Margaret Aubrey walking hand in hand along the Portland waterfront, taken yesterday according to her Instagram timestamp. We need to stop pretending. He stared at the photo for a long moment, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. When he looked up, I saw resignation rather than surprise in his eyes. How long have you known? Months. The question is, how long has this been going on? Tom set down his fork and rubbed his temples. Sienna, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You've become quite creative with explanations lately. I removed more photos from the folder. Here you are at Le Bernardin in September, Powell's Books in August, Cannon Beach in July, the same weekend you told me you were at a conference in Salem. It's not what you think. What I think is that you've been having an affair with Margaret Aubrey for at least 8 months. What I think is that you've stolen over $6,000 from our joint account to fund this relationship. What I think is that you've been lying to me every single day while I've been cooking your meals and managing your household. Tom was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. How did you find out about Margaret? Does it matter? The point is that I know. The question now is what you intend to do about it. What do you mean? I reached into the folder one more time and pulled out the printout of Margaret's engagement ring photo. She's expecting you to propose, isn't she? She's been posting about taking relationships to the next level and putting rings on the proper finger. Tom's face went completely white. Sienna, are you planning to ask me for a divorce, Tom? Or were you planning to keep both of us indefinitely? The question hung in the air between us, 25 years of marriage reduced to this moment of terrible clarity. When Tom finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. I honestly don't know what I want anymore. I nodded calmly and removed the final document from the folder, the preliminary divorce papers Jonas had prepared. Well then, I said, sliding them across the table, let me help you decide. Tom stared at the divorce papers as if they were written in a foreign language. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the document, scanning the legal terminology with growing alarm. Sienna, what is this? Dissolution of marriage papers, prepared by my attorney. Everything's there. Asset division, spousal support calculations, and a detailed accounting of the marital funds you've diverted to your girlfriend. He flipped through the pages, his face cycling through confusion, shock, and something approaching panic. Your attorney? How long have you been planning this? About as long as you've been planning your future with Margaret. I took a sip of wine, surprised by my own calm. The difference is, I've been honest about my intentions. Sienna, please, we don't need lawyers. We can work this out between ourselves. Can we? Because 5 minutes ago you told me you didn't know what you wanted. That doesn't sound like someone ready to work things out. Tom set the papers down and reached across the table toward my hand. I pulled back slightly, and he seemed to understand that the gesture was no longer welcome. I've made mistakes, he said, serious mistakes. But throwing away 25 years of marriage? I'm not throwing anything away, Tom. You already did that when you decided Margaret was worth more than our vows. It's not that simple, isn't it? I stood and walked to the kitchen, returning with the main course, the beef tenderloin he'd been looking forward to. I set it in front of him with the same care I'd show for 2 decades. Tell me, what's complicated about lying to your wife every day for 8 months? What's complex about stealing her money to buy jewelry for another woman? He looked down at the perfectly prepared meal and seemed to realize the irony. You cooked my favorite dinner to serve me divorce papers? I thought it was appropriate. How many meals have I prepared for you over the years, Tom? How many times have I asked about your day and believed your lies? How many times have I supported your career while you used my income to fund your affair? I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to keep us both indefinitely? Set Margaret up in an apartment with my money while I continued managing your household? Tom was quiet for a long moment, staring at the divorce papers. I hoped I could figure out what I wanted without having to hurt anyone. You thought you could have your cake and eat it too. That's not fair. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Fair? You want to discuss fairness? Let's talk about the $6,000 you've stolen from our accounts. Let's discuss the weekend trips to Cannon Beach, the same place you proposed to me 30 years ago. Let's examine the fairness of me finding out about your affair through Instagram posts. How did you... He stopped himself, perhaps realizing the question was irrelevant. Tom, I need you to understand something. This isn't an emotional outburst. This isn't a threat designed to bring you back to me. This is me protecting myself from further financial and emotional damage. He picked up the papers again, scanning more carefully this time. Dissipation of marital assets, reimbursement of funds. Sienna, this is asking for a lot more than 50% of our assets. The law in Oregon allows for unequal distribution when one spouse has wasted marital property on an affair. Every dollar you spent on Margaret, every hotel room, every piece of jewelry, that money should be returned to the marital estate. I can't afford this, the amount you're asking for. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to fund a relationship with money that wasn't entirely yours. Tom stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked our garden. Sienna, I know I've hurt you. I know I've made terrible decisions. But we have 25 years together. Doesn't that count for something? It counted for everything, Tom, until you decided it counted for nothing. I never said it counted for nothing. Your actions said it. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every romantic dinner with her while I waited at home with your meals, your actions told me exactly how much our marriage was worth to you. He turned back to face me, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time since I'd confronted him. What if I ended it with Margaret? What if I committed to rebuilding our marriage? Based on what foundation? Trust? You've destroyed that completely. Respect? You've shown me none. Love? You've been giving that to someone else. People rebuild marriages after affairs all the time. Some people do, but not when the betrayed spouse has been funding the affair with her own money. Not when the unfaithful spouse can't even decide what he wants when confronted directly. Tom sat back down, looking defeated. So this is it? 25 years? Over just like that? Not just like that, Tom. This has been building for months while you've been lying to my face. I've had time to process, to grieve, to plan. You're just now facing the consequences of choices you've been making since February. He stared at the divorce papers again. What happens next? You have two choices. Sign these papers, and we proceed with an uncontested divorce, which will be faster and less expensive for both of us, or refuse to sign, and we'll let the courts decide everything after a very public and very expensive legal battle. And if I choose the legal battle? I smiled coldly. Then Margaret will get to see exactly how much your relationship is going to cost both of you. I have excellent documentation, Tom. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every romantic Instagram post. It won't be pleasant for anyone. He was quiet for several minutes, processing the magnitude of his situation. Finally, he spoke. I need time to think. Of course you do. Take all the time you need. But Tom, I stood and began clearing the dinner dishes. Until you decide, I'll be sleeping in the guest room, and I'll be monitoring our accounts very carefully. As I walked to the kitchen with his untouched plate, I added quietly, I hope it was worth it. Tom didn't sign the papers that night, or the next morning, or for the rest of the week. Instead, he moved through our house like a ghost, making perfunctory conversation and avoiding eye contact. I could hear him on long phone calls behind his closed office door, his voice alternating between pleading and frustrated tones. On Thursday evening, I received a call from Jonas Everett. Mrs. Miles, I've been contacted by your husband's attorney, Richard Fielding from Fielding & Associates. He's requesting a meeting to discuss settlement terms. Tom hired Richard Fielding? I knew the name. Fielding specialized in protecting wealthy men's assets during divorce proceedings. His advertisements in the local business journal promised to minimize financial damage from marital dissolution. Apparently so. He's also filed a response challenging our asset division calculations and requesting a forensic accounting of your writing income. I felt a flare of anger. He's challenging my income? The income he's been stealing from. It's a standard defensive move. He's trying to establish that you have more resources than we've claimed, which could reduce potential spousal support. Don't worry, we expected this. What happens next? Discovery phase. Both sides exchange financial documents, take depositions, build their cases. It could take several months. Several months of legal warfare while Tom continue living in my house and eating my food? The irony was almost unbearable. That weekend, while Tom claimed to be visiting his sister in Eugene, Henrietta called with disturbing news. Margaret's Instagram has gone private, she reported. But before it did, she posted something interesting. A photo of a key with the caption, "New adventures ahead," and the hashtag, "Move him in." My stomach dropped. Moving in where? I did some digging. There's a new lease application on file for a downtown Portland apartment. 2 bedrooms, luxury building. The application lists both Tom Miles and Margaret Aubrey as tenants. He's moving in with her? It looks that way. Monthly rent is $2,800. That's more than he can afford on his salary alone, especially with divorce proceedings. I felt the familiar rage building in my chest. Even while fighting our divorce, he was planning his future with her, using money he didn't yet have. Monday morning, I called Jonas with this information. "This actually helps our case," he said. "If he's committing to expenses based on assets he hasn't been awarded, it demonstrates intent to dissipate marital property. We can file for an emergency restraining order. Do it." "There's something else, Mrs. Miles. Fielding has subpoenaed your publisher, requesting records of your book sales and royalty payments for the past 5 years. Can he do that?" "Unfortunately, yes. He's trying to prove you have hidden assets or that your income is higher than we've stated. It's harassment, but it's legal harassment." I hung up feeling violated all over again. It wasn't enough that Tom had stolen my money and betrayed our marriage. Now he was trying to weaponize my career success against me. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from our daughter Rebecca. "Mom, I just got off the phone with Dad. He called to give me his side of the story." "What did he say?" "That you're being vindictive and unreasonable, that you're trying to destroy him financially out of spite." Rebecca's voice was tight with controlled anger. I told him exactly what I thought of his side of the story. "I'm sorry he dragged you into this." "Don't be sorry. I needed to hear it directly from him. Do you know what he had the nerve to say? That the affair wasn't about you. It was about him feeling unappreciated and trapped, as if cheating was some kind of therapeutic breakthrough." I wasn't surprised. Tom had always been skilled at reframing his mistakes as responses to other people's failures. He also said Margaret is the first person in years who makes him feel alive. Rebecca's voice dripped with disdain. I asked him if he'd ever considered that maybe making yourself feel alive shouldn't require destroying someone else's life. What did he say to that? That I didn't understand the complexities of adult relationships. So I told him I understood them well enough to know the difference between working on your marriage and running away from it. The emergency restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. Jonas had assembled a compelling case: the lease application, evidence of continued financial misconduct, and documentation of Tom's pattern of deception. The night before the hearing, Tom approached me in the kitchen while I was preparing dinner. "Sienna, this has gone too far. We're destroying each other." I didn't look up from chopping vegetables. "I'm not destroying anything, Tom. I'm protecting what's left of my financial security." "The restraining order you're seeking would freeze all our assets. I couldn't even pay my attorney." "You should have considered that before you signed a lease with your girlfriend using money you don't have. How did you know about the lease?" I finally looked at him. "I know about everything, Tom. I've known for months. The only difference is that now I'm not pretending otherwise." He sat down heavily at the kitchen island. "I never wanted it to be this ugly." "Then you shouldn't have made it this complicated." I continued preparing dinner, a simple pasta dish that would feed one person. "You had 2 choices 8 months ago: work on our marriage or ask for a divorce. Instead, you chose a third option: lie, steal, and cheat while expecting me to continue taking care of you." I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. You knew enough to steal $6,000 from our account. You knew enough to sign a lease with another woman. You were only confused about whether you could get away with having both lives indefinitely." Tom was quiet for several minutes. "What if I break the lease? What if I end things with Margaret?" I turned to face him fully. "Tom, even if you did all of that, and I don't believe you would, what exactly would we be rebuilding? A marriage where I can never trust you again? Where I have to monitor our bank accounts because you've proven you'll steal from me? Where every business trip makes me wonder if you're lying?" He had no answer for that. "The hearing is tomorrow at 10, I said, returning to my cooking. "I suggest you prepare yourself for the consequences of your choices." The emergency hearing was a disaster for Tom's legal strategy. Judge Patricia Novak, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened impassively as Jonas presented evidence of the Portland lease, the continued asset dissipation, and Tom's pattern of financial deception. Richard Fielding's attempts to paint me as a vindictive spouse fell flat when faced with bank records and Instagram screenshots. The judge granted the restraining order, freezing Tom's access to our joint accounts except for basic living expenses of $1,500 per month. "Mr. Miles," Judge Novak said sternly, "entering into financial commitments based on assets you haven't been awarded demonstrates either poor judgment or intentional misconduct. Either way, this court will not allow further dissipation of marital property." Walking out of the courthouse, Tom looked like a man who'd finally grasped the magnitude of his situation. His monthly expenses, mortgage, car payment, insurance, legal fees, far exceeded the allowance the court had granted. The luxury apartment with Margaret was now financially impossible. That afternoon, Henrietta called with the news I'd been expecting.
Margaret's Instagram is back to public, and she is not happy, Henrietta reported with barely concealed satisfaction. She posted a long rant about false promises and men who can't deliver on their commitments. She's also posted photos of herself at dinner with someone new. Looks like she's already moving on. That was fast. 3 days, to be exact. The new guy appears to be David Chen, a real estate developer, much younger than Tom, and judging by his car and her photos, much wealthier. I felt an unexpected wave of satisfaction, followed immediately by pity for Tom. Margaret had shown her true colors the moment his financial situation became complicated. He'd thrown away 25 years of marriage for a woman who'd abandon him the instant he couldn't afford her lifestyle. That evening, Tom came home looking haggard and defeated. He found me in my office, working on edits for my next novel. "Margaret ended it," he said without preamble. I looked up from my laptop. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you?" I considered the question honestly. "I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm not sorry that you're facing the consequences of your choices." He slumped into the chair across from my desk. "She said the legal complications were too stressful, that she needed someone who could provide stability in her life. And you believed her feelings for you were deeper than that? I thought what we had was real. What you had was expensive, Tom. There's a difference." He was quiet for several minutes. "Sienna, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance, any possibility that we could try to work things out?" I saved my document and closed the laptop, giving him my full attention. "Based on what foundation, Tom? Trust? Respect? Shared values? Based on 25 years of history? Based on the fact that I realize now what I've lost? You realized what you lost when your girlfriend dumped you, not when you were betraying our marriage. That's not the same thing. I was stupid. I was selfish. I threw away the most important relationship in my life for someone who didn't actually care about me." "Yes, you did. But Tom, the person you betrayed wasn't just your wife. It was me, specifically. The woman who cooked your meals and supported your career and trusted you completely. That woman is gone. I can't go back to being her, and I wouldn't want to." He looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've discovered that I'm stronger and more independent than I ever knew. I've learned to protect myself, to value myself, to fight for what I deserve.
The woman you cheated on would have begged you to come back. The woman I am now is filing for divorce." Tom stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "You really have changed. I've grown, and part of that growth includes recognizing that some betrayals can't be forgiven, not because I'm not capable of forgiveness, but because forgiving would require me to diminish myself." "So that's it? No chance at all?" I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "Tom, I hope you find happiness someday. Real happiness. Not the kind that requires deceiving people who love you. But you won't find it with me." As he left my office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The angry, betrayed wife was finally giving way to someone calmer and more resolved. Margaret's abandonment had done what no amount of legal maneuvering could accomplish. It had shown Tom exactly what his choices had cost him. Now he would have to live with that knowledge alone. With Margaret out of the picture and Tom's financial situation severely constrained by the court order, his resistance to the divorce settlement crumbled rapidly. Richard Fielding called Jonas within a week of the restraining order hearing, requesting immediate settlement negotiations. "His position has changed dramatically," Jonas reported during our phone call. "Fielding is now recommending that Tom accept our original terms rather than continue with expensive litigation he can't afford." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tom's affair had been funded by my money, and now his inability to access that same money was forcing him to capitulate in our divorce. We met in Jonas's conference room on a gray November morning. Tom looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. His face was drawn, his expensive suits had been replaced with more modest clothing, and his confidence had evaporated entirely. "Mrs. Miles," Richard Fielding began, "my client is prepared to accept the settlement terms outlined in your original filing." I studied Tom across the polished conference table. "All terms? Including full reimbursement for the dissipated assets?" "Yes," Tom said quietly. "All terms." The settlement was everything I'd hoped for. 65% of our marital assets, the house, $2,800 monthly spousal support for 8 years, and full reimbursement of the $6,147 he'd stolen from our accounts to fund his affair. Tom would keep his 401k and his car, but little else. "There's one additional item," Jonas said, sliding a document across the table. "Mrs. Miles has requested that Mr. Miles acknowledge in writing that the marriage ended due to his infidelity and financial misconduct." Tom's lawyer started to object, but Tom held up his hand. "I'll sign it." "Tom, this admission could have implications for future—" "I'll sign it," Tom repeated firmly. "She deserves that much." As we finalized the paperwork, I felt a mixture of relief and melancholy. 25 years of marriage, reduced to property division and support calculations. But there was also satisfaction in knowing I'd protected my financial future and held Tom accountable for his choices. "What will you do now?" Tom asked as we prepared to leave the conference room. "I'm going to finish my current book and start planning the next one. I'm considering a series about women who rebuild their lives after major upheavals."
Sounds like you'll have plenty of material to draw from. Unfortunately, yes. We walked to the parking garage together, our lawyers having departed after handshakes and promises to file the final paperwork. In the elevator, Tom spoke again. "Sienna, I know this doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that Margaret ending things wasn't what made me realize what I'd lost. It was seeing how strong you became through all this. The woman who served me those divorce papers, that's who you really are, isn't it? Not the accommodating wife I took for granted. That's who I've always been, Tom. You just never bothered to look." As the elevator doors opened, I added, "I hope you learned something from this experience. Real love isn't about finding someone who makes you feel young again. It's about choosing to grow old together." Tom nodded, understanding that this was goodbye in every sense that mattered. I drove home to my house now, and began planning the rest of my life. The divorce would be final in 6 months, but my real transformation was already complete. I had served him justice, and in doing so, I had served myself freedom. 6 months after the settlement, I was sitting in my redesigned kitchen, sipping morning coffee and reviewing the final manuscript of Second Chances at 70, my most personal novel yet.
The protagonist, Eleanor, was a grandmother who discovers her husband's affair and transforms herself from victim to victor through strategic action and self-discovery. My editor at Riverside Publishing had called it empowering and authentic, and early reader reviews were extraordinary. Women my age were messaging me through social media, sharing their own stories of betrayal and reinvention. I'd apparently tapped into something universal about the experience of being underestimated and fighting back. The financial settlement had given me more than just security. It had given me the freedom to write exactly what I wanted, rather than chasing market trends. Tom's spousal support payments arrived promptly each month, a reminder that actions have lasting consequences. My daughter Rebecca visited frequently now, bringing the grandchildren for weekend stays in what had become a much livelier household. Without Tom's rigid schedules and travel demands, I'd discovered the joy of spontaneous plans and noisy family dinners. "Mom, you seem so much happier," Rebecca observed one Saturday afternoon as we watched her 8-year-old daughter Emma help me bake cookies. "I am happier. It took me a while to realize that the person I was in my marriage wasn't really me. It was who I thought I needed to be to keep someone else comfortable." "Do you ever miss him?" I considered the question while Emma carefully measured flour. "I miss the idea of him, the partnership I thought we had, but I don't miss walking on eggshells or wondering if I was boring him. I don't miss feeling grateful for scraps of attention." "Grandma Sienna," Emma interrupted, "why did Grandpa Tom move away?" Rebecca started to intervene, but I held up my hand. Emma deserved an honest answer appropriate for her age. "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people, sweetheart. When that happens, sometimes it's healthier for everyone to live separately." "But you're not sad?" "Not anymore. I'm actually excited about all the things I can do now." And I was. I joined a local writing group, started taking watercolor classes, and reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. My social calendar was fuller than it had been in years. I'd also begun corresponding with other women who'd been through similar experiences. Some had stayed and rebuilt their marriages, others had left and created new lives. What struck me was how many had discovered strength they didn't know they possessed. Through Henrietta's continued social media monitoring, now more friendship than investigation, I learned that Tom was living quietly in a modest apartment across town. He'd returned to his sales job, but without the energy and ambition he'd once shown. Margaret had married David Chen in an elaborate ceremony that was extensively documented on Instagram. I felt no satisfaction in Tom's apparent struggles, but I also felt no obligation to help him rebuild what he'd destroyed. He was reaping what he'd sown, just as I was. The most surprising development had been an email from a film producer interested in adapting my latest novel for television. The story of a woman fighting back against betrayal had apparently struck a nerve with audiences hungry for stories about female empowerment in later life. "It's not just about divorce," the producer had explained during our video call. "It's about refusing to be invisible, about claiming your worth regardless of age or circumstance." As I finished my coffee and prepared to start another day of writing, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. A year ago, I'd been cooking breakfast for a man who was stealing my money to fund his affair. Today, I was a successful author planning a potential television adaptation while managing my own household on my own terms. I had served Tom divorce papers for dinner, but what I'd really served myself was liberation. 2 years after my divorce was finalized, I stood in the kitchen of my renovated home preparing dinner for 12 guests, my writing group, Rebecca's family, and several new friends I'd made through my watercolor classes. The kitchen that had once been a shrine to accommodating Tom's preferences had become the warm heart of a vibrant social life. "Grandma Sienna, your house is the best," 10-year-old Emma declared, helping me arrange appetizers on platters. She was right. The house that had felt so quiet and controlled during my marriage now buzzed with energy. Book club meetings, family gatherings, impromptu dinner parties, my home had become a place where people wanted to spend time, including me. My latest novel, The Dinner Party Revenge, had just hit the New York Times bestseller list. The story of a woman who discovers her husband's affair during an elegant dinner party and serves him comeuppance along with dessert had resonated with readers worldwide. The book had been optioned for film, and I was consulting on the screenplay. "I still can't believe my mom is famous now," Rebecca said, arranging flowers in the dining room. When I was growing up, you were just mom who made great dinners and helped with homework. I never knew you had this fierce warrior side. I didn't know either, I admitted. I think she was always there, just buried under years of trying to be the perfect wife. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Henrietta carrying a bottle of wine and her signature warm smile. She'd become my closest friend and occasional research partner, helping me fact-check details for my novels about women reclaiming their power. "How's our best-selling author?" she asked, giving me a hug. "Overwhelmed and grateful," I replied. "Sometimes I can't believe this is my life." As guests arrived and the house filled with conversation and laughter, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd been 3 years ago. That Sienna had measured her worth by how well she served others, how seamlessly she managed their needs, how little trouble she caused. This Sienna measured her worth by her own accomplishments, her relationships built on mutual respect, her ability to set boundaries and enforce them. During dinner, my friend Sally Collins from the writing group raised her glass. "I want to propose a toast to Sienna, who taught us all that it's never too late to rewrite your story." "Hear, hear," the table chorused. Later, as I cleaned up with help from my guests, something that would have horrified the old me who insisted on handling everything herself, Rebecca pulled me aside. "Mom, there's something I want to tell you. Dad called me last week." I paused in loading the dishwasher. "How is he?" "Struggling, I think. He asked about you, about your success. I told him you were thriving, and he said," she hesitated, "he said he finally understood what he'd lost. Not just a wife who took care of him, but a partner who was remarkable in her own right." I absorbed this information without the emotional sting I might have felt 2 years ago. "I hope he finds peace with his choices, Rebecca, but his regret doesn't change anything for me." "I know, and I'm proud of you for that." As the last guest departed and I turned off the lights in my beautiful, bustling home, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Tom had unknowingly given me the greatest gift possible. He'd forced me to discover who I was when I stopped defining myself through other people's needs. I'd spent 20 years cooking for a man who ultimately didn't value what I was offering. Now I cook for people who appreciated not just my meals, but my company, my thoughts, my contributions to their lives. The woman who had once served dinner to her husband's mistress had become someone who served inspiration to women everywhere. The kitchen that had been a place of quiet service had become a place of celebration and community. I'd learned that the best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you. It's building a life so fulfilling that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. Tom had taken my old life, but in doing so, he'd freed me to create a much better one. As I headed upstairs to my peaceful bedroom, redecorated in colors I loved, filled with books I'd chosen, overlooking a garden I'd replanted according to my own vision, I smiled at the realization that hit me. I hadn't just survived Tom's betrayal, I'd used it as the foundation for the most authentic, successful, and joyful chapter of my life. The dinner was over, but the feast of possibilities ahead was just beginning.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.